Yeah, give me one moment.
Okay. Just hold on tight. We're trying to figure out what the setup needs to be here. As soon as Monica figures that out, we'll be right back.
That's
Station
cool,
break.
Rima. We should have the DJ for us.
I know. I know, right?
I got y'all right now.
Yeah, all right. So I'm assuming everybody's having the same issue that I'm having with what's appearing on the screen.
Hello. Hopefully I'm in the right room.
You know, maybe I should just,
It's the same thing on my screen, but I can play some music as we wait if folks are okay with
all
that.
right. So, thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
Let me see if I can pin everybody that's supposed to be in here.
So we just got news that the slide will be up for a little bit, but they'll take it down soon.
Okay, so do you want me to go ahead and pin everybody who's
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I'm trying to find everybody. Hold on. I don't see Divinity. Oh, there she is. All right, and then G. Okay, where is G? Monica, can you help me find G?
Yes. Oh, I think G's here.
If you find him, can you pin him and I guess myself?
Yes.
I can pin myself if that's doable. I see the pin.
Yeah, go ahead, G. Thank you.
Well, it looks like I'm the only one on the screen now. Let me. Well, this is fun. I love technology.
Right, yes. Okay, so yeah, if you can pin yourself and then I think, you know, the gang will all be here. Let me see if I can. I'm not, is your name on your icon somewhere? I'm not seeing you. Oh, wait, there you are. Okay, can you see us? I pinned the right person, right? G, is that you?
Yeah, that's me.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, so the gang's all here. All right. And Divinity, are you able to turn on your camera?
Okay. Let's see.
Great.
Are we all supposed to appear on the screen?
Yes, for now, yes, we are.
Okay. Because
So-
I pinned myself.
Okay, are you seeing all of us or just yourself?
I see everyone.
Okay, perfect.
And it's Breakout
Perfect. Yeah. So nice to see you all, and thank you for your patience and the audience's patience and us getting set up technically. So we are in breakout session 4, strengthening integration and strategies for
I'm
robust
sorry,
CBO.
Rhonda.
Yeah.
I'm the Spanish interpreter. I've been waiting to be let into the call so that I can do the
Okay.
simultaneous interpretation into Spanish of what you're saying, and I'm still waiting. I've dialed the number and the code, but nothing is happening. I don't know if you are the
Okay.
person to help me.
So
or who.
Monica, hey, can you help with that?
Yeah, I can check on that. Rhonda, can you just go ahead and I'm gonna Slack the team.
Okay, thank you. I will speak a little slower. So I'll just introduce myself before we roll into things. So I am Rhonda Smith, the Executive Director of the California Black Health Network. I will say a little bit about who I am and what I do and why I do this work. And so for me, we are the only Black-led state organization or statewide organization that works to advance health equity for all Black Californians. And I came into this work and focus on health disparities because of a major health issue that I had about 14 years ago, and that was a breast cancer diagnosis. And that led me to my first experience in dealing with health disparities when I was living in South Florida at the time, and just became really disenchanted and also intrigued about how at the time breast cancer or Black women in South Florida were being impacted by breast cancer, and then the disproportionate number of Black women dying of breast cancer. And so that set me on the path to do this work and also discover what I was truly passionate about and be able to do work that connects my passion and purpose to make a difference in my community. And so I uprooted my life and moved to California 9 years ago. And professionally, it was the best decision I could have ever made to continue to do this work and be able to make a living doing it and meet wonderful people like the folks that are on camera and behind the scenes that I've had an opportunity to meet and cultivate relationships and partnerships with. So that's my story. I know everybody else has a story and interested in hearing all of what you do, why you do this work and what it means to you. So let's start with you, Terry. So tell us who you are, what you do, and what this work means to you.
Ayuki Nanithwaiti Terry Sapahan. I'm a Karuk tribal member, the Karuk tribes on the Klamath River in Northern California. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm the director of the True North Organizing Network, which organizes with Native communities, tribes, Black, white, Hmong, and Latinx people in Northwestern California in the Redwood region. And what this work means to me, and I loved your story, Rhonda. Thank you so much for personalizing what we're doing here today. I am kind of at my boss's meeting. I'm leaving my boss's meeting to be here with you because we're talking about elections coming up and statewide work. But I'm a community organizer, and I think these relationships that we talk about, I care deeply about environmental justice. This morning, we were talking about housing work and housing for all, and there's other work going to be talked about this afternoon. But I just want to be able to say that what this work means to me, and it means to all of us, is that when we build these relationships, we need to be able to use them for the people and the communities that we care about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Yara, how about you go next? Same
Yeah,
thing.
of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ali Montiel. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I was born in Michoacán, Mexico. My mom migrated to the United States when I was 7 years old. I'm a first generation. I'm the outreach program supervisor for Vista Community Clinic. I work directly with our low-income migrant, farm worker, Latinx, all of the above community, underserved. And our main goal to be the bridge between all of the health resources, programs, services that all of these institutions have and the community. So we always try to focus on us being that connection between that gap that sometimes it gets bigger and bigger, right? And the reason what this work means to me is because not only do I work with the community, but I also come from the community. So I think that's very important to really understand the needs that are always in the community, and thinking of where we come from and why all of these topics are important to us.
Great, thank you very
you.
much. Thank you. And Divinity?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Divinity Matovu, and I am a consultant with California Black Women's Health Project, which is an organization that does policy and advocacy work for California's 1.2 million Black women and girls. Very passionate about the population that we work with, but during this project with CPEN, we've been focused on multicultural community organizing. So we're not just focused on the Black population, and it's been good to kind of expand my wings with CPEN. I myself was diagnosed with PTSD, and also after having my first child, I experienced postpartum depression, which a lot of women deal with after having a child. Not to mention the first child can just be overwhelming. And so through my own personal diagnoses, I became familiar with just the broad ranges of standard of care, you know, just it's like, depending on where you live, depending on your income, you know, you're getting very different standards of care. And once I realized that, I became agitated and activated to do this work. And so I am excited to be here and hear from others and share whatever lessons I learned along the way on this project in particular with those who are in the room.
Thank you very much, Divinity. And G.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ji Yang. I am the program manager for Hmong Cultural Center of Butte County here in Oroville, California. I am actually in the process of overseeing 8 different programs here at the Hmong Cultural Center. You know, I oversee programs that have services for families with children 0 to 5, all the way up to youth, and all the way extending to seniors and elders. And with these programs, we do everything from education, advocacy, mental health, and then we also do you know, outreach as well. What this work means to me, you know, growing up in a rural area here in Butte County, you know, I see that there was a lot of disconnect with the community as a whole. You know, the Hmong community is very reserved. However, the community at large, their services and you know, their outreach methods are just not as effective. So I enjoy doing my work. You know, I am at the front lines with my team, and we are the liaison. We are the liaison between our community at large and the Hmong community. We get to communicate and educate, you know, the stakeholders and policymakers, and then again also educate and empower our community to, you know, provide that equity and services and education. And so, yeah, you know, that's me.
Great. Well, thank each of you for sharing your story and why you do this work and kind of how you got to this work. We'll learn a little bit more about that shortly. And so the way things are going to flow is we'll hear from each of the panelists here. So there's a series of questions that I will ask. I won't do a whole lot of talking, but we're going to hear from all of the panelists, and each of you will have about 3 to 5 minutes to respond to the questions. So we'll hear from everybody, and they will provide their perspective on each of the different questions. And just, you know, we're looking forward to hearing about your experience in organizing around the work that you did with their listening sessions and some of the advocacy work that you all did in your local communities, both in urban and rural settings. Then learn about what you learned and what your outcomes are, and where are you going from here with the work that that came out of the listening sessions and what you did locally. So my first question to you all is, you know, you spoke about this is what this work means to me, or to you in particular, and why you do this work, but can you elaborate a little bit more on like your journey more specifically, and more of a personal story that, you know, what you want to share, and your lived experience that really shape and inform the work that you do now with your respective organizations. So why don't we start with G, and then we'll work our way back to Terry.
All right. Well, you know, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm a native here in Oroville. I was born here. I was raised here. I'm a first generation Hmong American here in Oroville. I also went to, you know, school here in CSU Chico. So I've been local my whole life, and you know, to see how much change and how much impact, you know, the work that I do here have helped my community step up to the plate of, you know, being able to empower themselves to go out and look for services or fight for services that are needed. I really enjoy the fact that, you know, partnering up with, you know, our local behavioral health department, they were able to be flexible enough to give us resources so we can translate it and interpret it to our Hmong community, and have our Hmong community, you know, seek the services there. It's basically, we've been able to effectively communicate back and forth between our community and the community at large, you know, train the community at large so that they're culturally competent. However, there is still a long way to go, but you know, the journey and the lived experiences that, you know, have shaped me to be who I am and what I do, you know, just growing up and seeing that big disconnect of, you know, having services that are not culturally appropriate or not from a cultural approach. It made it very hard for our community to get the services and the help that we needed. So having the Hmong culture here be one of the effective and, you know, only Hmong organization up north from Sacramento to, you know, the Oregon border. We connect and we help and we educate a lot of you know, of Hmong individuals in our community. And you know, the biggest part is teaching them about mental health, because mental health isn't a topic that is you know, regularly talked about in the community. It's basically a taboo topic. You know, a lot of our elders, they think mental health just means that one is basically crazy. So you know, being able to decipher the information and break it down and you know, educate the community at large, that's you know, that's what makes this work so makes me so passionate about this work.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Terry, for the note. And thank you, G, for sharing that. I think that we probably all experience the similar approach to mental health and how it's perceived in our community. I think with the younger generation, what we're seeing is that there's more uptake, so to speak, or more openness to seeking mental health support and resources. So happy to see that. But for folks in my generation and who came before me, may not be as open-minded to it. But certainly, I think we all have experienced and been impacted by what our life has been like over the last couple of years. So thank you for sharing that. And then Divinity, how about you?
Sure, I'll keep it short. But I think that just from sharing my own personal story, when it came time to think about who would be the keynote speaker, for example, for one of the events that we organized, I threw in the ring my former therapist, who was well versed on trauma and intergenerational trauma, particularly with Black and Brown communities. When it came time to interact with LA County Department of Mental Health, and we also did events in LA County and San Bernardino County. It was easy to have the conversation with them because I had the language, from my own personal dealings. And so it was nice. We ended up bringing my former therapist to be a keynote speaker at one of the events. And so I'll just say that, that was refreshing to be able to make that happen. And people were eager to talk at our community listening sessions. People are ready to rip the Band-Aid off and destigmatize this conversation and have the conversation openly without judgment or, without that crazy label, like G was saying. It's so much more than that, and it's so much more complex than that. And I think the millennial generation, I feel like, is like breaking down, to your generational point, Rhonda. The millennial generation, I feel like, is breaking down the stigma and like being pulled both ways. And then this Gen Z, what they're calling Gen Z, or the Alpha generation, which is my daughter, she's 10. She's all well versed on mental health, and they are meditating at school and stuff like that. And I'm like, this is amazing. So I think we're in good hands for the future. But for now, we continue to do this work. I think we're in good hands moving forward.
All right. So why don't we skip over to Terry? I know, Terry, you have to leave around 2:30. So I want to make sure we hear your voice and things that you have to share before you take off.
I want to amplify what Divinity just said, and I think it is in good hands, but I also think that we all get to try to learn more and strive to be empathetic. I know for me, this past year, I learned something that I was surprised that I had learned, but my Native American mother was full-blooded, and she was a single mom, and we lived with my great aunt, my great uncle, their grandparents for the first 5 years. And then she thought that I needed a dad in my life, I guess, and she should have let me pick him out, because she picked out the wrong one. And he was a pretty hard person to be around for anyone. And for decades, I didn't like him, and it was always a negative influence that I was having to work around. And he checked himself into the state mental hospital twice, and he had bouts of manic behavior and activity that triggered his violence at times. But the past year, more than that, but definitely this past year, my one partner really put a lot of energy out for her daughter, who was diagnosed with bipolar 5 years ago, has really softened me and has given me an empathy toward my stepdad, who long ago died and passed away. But I recognize better that maybe his life and therefore maybe my life and all the rest of my family's life would have been better if there had been what not only the science and treatment that we have today, but just an effort to try to strive to understand somebody and give them the things that make their lives and their hell a little less hellish, and I just I continue to reflect on that and to try to understand myself better as a result of that. That's the personal part I wanted to share on it.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that again. I know you shared that in the prep meeting, and thank you for being more open about that with everyone else. And, you know, it's great that you're able to have empathy, even though maybe growing up, you know, it wasn't the best experience or most pleasant, and your feelings towards your stepfather weren't necessarily the most loving, but being able to grow and learn and have that insight, I think, you know, extends to the community as well in the work that you do. So that's a great takeaway from all that you went through in your journey. So thank you for that. And Yetta, how about you?
Yeah. So when I read this question, it was either I go and share on the professional side, or like really share deep on my like experiences in life. And I think one of the reason I'm gonna share a more personal story is because I think this is why we're here, making these conferences on mental health. And I grew up in a family of 12. We're a big Mexican family, mixed status. My parents didn't have health insurance. My mom developed diabetes, and it's very common in our family. With diabetes came high blood pressure, and then depression also came in along with that. We didn't understand what was going on with my mom. All we knew was that she was getting a bunch of pills, and us being her only translator. I was one of the oldest for my family, so my unassigned job was to translate all of the medications and all of the documents that would come in. But I remember that we didn't know how to navigate the mental health or behavioral health system. All we knew is that she was getting medication for depression, and my mom is a very happy person. She loves outdoors. She has a bunch of birds, plants, and for that whole year, she was in her room. Like all she did was sleep, and us as her children, we didn't know what to do. So every time I work with our community health workers, our leaders, our community, I always think of my mom. If we decide to take all of this material on these topics, will my mom be able to understand? If we create all of these tools, will my mom be able to go through these tools? So definitely my mom's story did really shape why I'm working in public health and working for Basic Community Clinic and being that bridge between our community, because one, undocumented, no health insurance, language barrier, and also all of the other barriers like transportation, and it was a lot for our whole family and for her as a female Mexican Latina, to be able to understand everything that was going on with her. And I want to make sure that, just like Divinity mentioned, our next generation to be able to have all of these tools. So this is one of the main reasons why I'm doing this work. I always think of my mom and of what she had to go through.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I say something, Rhonda, real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
You know, that's something that came up in our listening sessions, were people talking about the burden that is on children due to the lack of translation services available, particularly with the county resources. Like, they have all these great resources, but they're inaccessible. And that's a huge burden to place on a child, to have to translate for a doctor, for example, or to translate written materials or pill bottles. And I just think I just wanted to say that. It's a huge burden on them.
I think it can be a burden no matter what age we are. Personally, I'm an only child. My dad died over 30 years ago. My mom had multiple myeloma and I was her primary caregiver. She was living in Virginia. I was living here in California and commuting back and forth to, care for her and be an advocate for her and look out for her and talk to the doctors. And so, yeah, as a child, I can't imagine having to bear that responsibility. So it's tough even as an adult. So, but thank you for sharing that information. But it's a good lead into the next question, kind of getting into the process and experience that you all had in your listening sessions and, setting them up and engaging local and county agencies and partnerships. And what do you think was a key success factor, or was, the most successful in the work that that you all did to get that started? So Yetter, why don't we start with you this time?
Of course. I think our more successful part of the listening sessions is that Vista Community Clinic, we do have a group of community health workers, líderes in our community. And it ranges between 20 to 30 community members. So it was easy for us to conduct our first listening session because it was open to them. And we didn't do a lot of trying to recruit other community members because we already had our líderes that are very experienced in the community. So that was our first listening session with our own community leaders, Poder Popular. And then our second listening session was more on community members and also just being out in the community, who was interested in our second session. Both of those were in Spanish. Definitely the second one was a lot harder to recruit just because the first one, we already know each other. Vista Community Clinic staff and our community leaders, we know each other. So one of the things that we notice a lot is that they were in a trusted space. And that's very important when we talk about mental health in our culture. We got a lot of feedback from them because, again, there was that trust. They trusted us and we trusted them. So they were very open to all of their experiences. And it was also in Spanish, which was a comfortable language for them. And then our last session was in English. We did open that one to health workers, our own staff, and we also invited our parent liaisons to learn more about how the schools were doing with this topic. That one was also a little bit hard. That one was, I think it was 1, 2, 3. The third one was a little bit harder, just because to have our community workers that a time that would work for them, like either before work or after work. And that one was in English, just because of like I mentioned, it was more of community staff that we wanted to invite to these listening sessions. But definitely I want to say that having that group in the community a lot of the times makes these events very successful because it's a trusted space.
Right.
Yeah.
So were there any other challenges that you encountered in organizing your events?
Challenges, yeah. I think because of COVID, and I know we all are probably tired of COVID and these times, it's very hard to engage people to events like before. Mm-hmm. I know that maybe Zoom is making it easier, but and even though our Arista Community Clinic is very well known in the community, it was hard to recruit community members out in the community. Also because we were not doing as much outreach as we were before. So we weren't having that much of one-on-one in the community. Our listening sessions were a little bit smaller than what we wanted, but they were very, I think because they were small, they were very, it felt really comfortable, all of the listening sessions. But definitely, I think the challenges would be trying to recruit community members in this topic, mental health.
Right.
Especially, again, we go back to our culture. Just like G said, what do you mean mental health? Like, I'm not crazy, no estoy loca. It's a lot of the things that we would get. And I think also explaining what we're trying to do with these listening sessions, what we were trying to do, also kind of giving them that more of like the background of why we were putting this together.
Great, thank you. And then Terry, I'm going to go to you because I know you're going to have to leave shortly, but if you could answer that question, and then as you wrap up your answer, so basically your experience with organizing your listening sessions, your successes and challenges, and anything else that you want to share with the audience here that you feel is important, since you won't be able to be with us past 2:30.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's 4 things that I want to share. One is through our community organizing, which is throughout the Redwood region. Because of our relationship with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network and the grant and the technical assistance and support and love, I and our organization was reminded that we could apply a mental health filter for all of our organizing activities and just make sure that we could advocate in community schools for more counselors and mental health breaks and things that Divinity was talking about earlier. The second thing is the grant allowed us, and the working relationships with the state provides impetus to do specific outreach to Native Americans and tribal communities around mental health. And that helped with renewing old relationships, authentic relationships. And we reached out to Ginger R. Rogers, who I believe presented this morning and told her story. And she did that at our listening session. And I think I believe strongly that whenever we tell those hard truths, those hard things about ourselves that we don't even like to tell ourselves, but then when we let it, we call it using our life's breath. When we use our life's breath to say it outside of ourselves, other people can share that with us and help us. And it's a healing art, I truly believe. But the fourth thing, I'm sorry to rush, but I do want to be able to say that our work all the time is teaching our people about power, our communities, all the different communities I said earlier. And once you and I have a relationship, that's sacred as well. That's important. But my job is also to encourage you to tell your story in public, and those public relationships, those power relationships. Sometimes our people forget that the people on the other side of the power are just people too. And we, because of the listening session, we developed some really quality relationships with our elected county officials and county health professionals that we continue to use and build upon throughout with other issues and activity areas this past year. So I'm just really thankful for all of you and the work that we've been engaged in with CPEN and looking forward to more. So.
Okay, thank you, Terry. And then why don't we go back over to Divinity if you want to share your experience with organizing your listening sessions. I know you mentioned that you typically focus on Black women here in California, but your focus was more multicultural. So can you talk about some of your successes and maybe challenges in organizing with a totally different audience than what you typically work with?
Yes. And we also had the added challenge of doing a second listening session in San Bernardino County, which we focus on, LA and the Bay. And so San Bernardino County was a bit amorphous for us. And we had to luckily, we had a contact at one of the Cal State San Bernardino, who plugged us in with a bunch of relevant groups. But in terms of the multicultural piece, what we did for recruiting was we just Googled like every ethnic group we could think of, plus mental health on Google, and I ended up with a good list of about 35 organizations. And they were pretty specific, like there were Korean groups, Cambodian groups, a lot of Latinx groups. And so I just reached out cold. I did a bunch of cold outreach. And I would say I got about a 50% hit rate, which was higher than I anticipated. And we incentivized them by letting them know that each organization that sent at least 3 people to the listening session would get I forgot what the prize was, but it was a cash prize. It was like a stipend. And I think we had set aside grant funds for that. And there were a lot of grant funds to be used since COVID changed everything, and we didn't have all these costs that we would have had if we were in person. So just plain old search on Google and cold outreach is how we overcame that hurdle with the multicultural. And I'm actually glad that we had multicultural lens, because the conversation was so robust. Like, all of the discussion about interpreters and translation services, that's not something that we typically deal with in the Black community. I mean, maybe you have, a Haitian immigrant who speaks French and needs translation, but it's not typically something that we deal with in the Black community as prevalent. And so it was refreshing to be like, oh yeah, this is an added challenge that, our Latino brothers and sisters deal with. And the other challenge that we faced when we were doing San Bernardino, again, not having ties really in the county, is that CPEN was pushing us to have it in person. We want to do an in-person event. And it was just, I think there was just so much unknown that the venues we approached in San Bernardino were like not getting back to us quickly enough. And we had to get the listening session done. So we decided to just keep it virtual. But I don't think we would have had a highest turnout if we would have done it in person. Although it would have been nice to actually get together. And I think the way the grant was originally designed was to have all these in-person events. And unfortunately, we didn't get to do that. So
yeah, it was conceived pre-COVID. So who knew, right? So thank you for that. And then G, but Tara, did you want to say anything before the 1 minute you have to take off? Any final thoughts? I wanted to give you some time and space for that.
I just dropped it into the chat. I'll drop it again. I know all of our time is valuable, and I appreciated everyone spending some time with us in this panel. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. And
Thank
Rhonda, I said it privately in the chat. I'll say it publicly. I thought you did a fantastic job for the tape. Very, very good interview.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry it took a while to get to this point, but happy. Thank you for saying
Like
that.
G said, technology is fun, ain't it?
Yeah, yes. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
All right, we'll
Uh,
see you folks.
All
Bye-bye.
right,
Bye,
G,
Terry.
I think you were more on the advocacy, if I remember correctly. You've done more advocacy in addition to listening sessions or a combination thereof. So your perspective may be a little different. So interested in hearing about your experience and your successes and challenges that you encountered.
Yeah. Thank you. Ours was a combination. It was actually quite a good blend. We did 2 listening sessions and 2 advocacy events. We focused our listening session on the Hmong community only. We did 1 session for the youth and then 1 session for older adults, because we wanted to give youth the space to to really talk what they feel, what they see, and what they've experienced. Because in our community, if you are younger and you're in a room full of elders, you don't ever want to talk over them, and we're raised to be humble to the elders. So a lot of times we know for sure that the youth will not talk. So we specifically made a session for the youth and specifically one for the elders. So yeah, it was great. We had a very good turnout with our youth. I think we had about 84. Oh no, what was 84? It's like 32 youth that came out to the listening session, and then we only got 10 for the adults. I think if it wasn't virtual, we would have had more people show up, but because it was virtual, it was kind of a challenge because during that time, not a lot of people was familiar with, Zoom and whatnot like that. So it was kind of a challenge. That was about it. But, when we did our advocacy events, we did one specifically in English without interpretation or translation, for healthcare providers, for workers, educators, and community at large. And then we did one specifically in Hmong with English translation for those that want to participate. And we were able to reach out to both communities, at the same time, where everybody was kind of on the same page, and the same information was dispersed, to both parties or both communities. I think the biggest highlight was that we were able to create a platform or space where the Hmong community can come out and voice their opinions, suggestions, and experience on mental health, and their experiences on accessing mental health services. And when the listening sessions were done and our reports ran out, it reached our behavioral health department and the director, and he did reach out. And we did discuss the outcomes and why the community feel the way that they do, and how we can work together to better improve the services over at the Department of Behavioral Health, and how we can better educate and support the whole community as a whole. The biggest piece was really, not from the Hmong Culture Center, but from the community at the Hmong community, to bring out their voices and showcase it, and have it broadcasted. That was the biggest part. We never had an opportunity to do that. So when we were able to do the listening session with CPEN and CRAC, it was rock hard. It was perfect. And it was also a perfect opportunity because it was probably at the peak of COVID. So everybody was going through a lot of mental health issues, with COVID, and family members passing away through COVID and all that stuff. So it was just it was tough. But the challenge was not having the proper terminology in Hmong for some of the mental health and medical terms. A lot of times we would have to elaborate or explain why that word is. the meeting. So it was kind of tedious, but then again, you know, we were able to get it across to our home community, and they were able to understand a little bit, but we still got a long way to go because, you know, there are no published terminology or dictionary on a specific medical or mental health terms. And, you know, that's something that we are working with, you know, scholars out there and researchers out there to kind of like finalize or come to a conclusion on agreeing what terms should be translated in which way so that everybody can understand and use it, whether they are, you know, old or they're new, they're old or they're younger, or, you know, whatever the age gap. Because, you know, the Hmong literature is not, there's no set curriculum. A lot of times it's just learned through, you know, what was passed on. So yeah, that was one of our biggest challenges.
Oh, cool. So you touched on something that I'm really curious about, whether or not Divinity or Yadra experience. So, you know, there's always the question of the connectivity and alignment and partnership and collaboration between community-based organizations and like the county public health departments, in particular, in our case, behavioral health. So I was just wondering if Yadra, you or Divinity also were able to forge a partnership and collaboration with other, you know, public health departments or behavioral health departments within the counties that you worked in. Divinity, you want to take a stab at it first?
Yes, thank you. We did in both LA and San Bernardino. We invited them to present at the listening sessions to tell us what were the departments doing differently due to COVID. And to give an overview, basically like behavioral health, county behavioral health 101. Like we wanted them to just assume that the audience they were speaking to knew nothing about their services. And so we gave them, I think, 20 minutes to talk. And then they also were a part of the Q&A afterwards, and both departments were happy to send someone, and we were able to follow up with them, and that those are relationships that we'll continue to cultivate, because who knows when we'll be able to partner again or collaborate on something else. But I was surprised with how serious the speakers took their role. They like put together a presentation, everything, and it was difficult because during the Q&A, people were voicing frustration with the county, and people were not always happy with the way that the county has done things. And so they took a little bit of fire and a little bit of heat that I don't think they were expecting. But it ended up being a great addition to kind of our agenda. And it was more intense in LA than San Bernardino. But nonetheless, we'd established a relationship, and they came, and we'll continue to be in touch with them.
Okay, great. And then Yadra, similar experience or different experience?
I think ours was a little bit more different because our listening sessions were very focused to the community. We wanted to get really raw material on what was going on in the community, what were the needs in the community. We wanted to learn from them. We didn't plan to have a speaker because we wanted to have a space for community members to share their experiences, have that, and I mean, I keep mentioning like them having a safe space to really be open, and then in the future provide those presenters and speakers. But I do want to share that while we were having our listening sessions, we still didn't have a good connection with the county in terms of mental health. We are a health center, so we do have different connections with the county. So that, like we mentioned, the county has so many different services and resources. And I'm not sure if I mentioned, but we are located in North County of San Diego. We're Southern California. We're really close to the border. So most of our population is Spanish speakers, where we are in North County. But if we say San Diego County, like central, it's very different when you talk about North County, where we're located. It's very different when it comes to a lot of topics like this. But for us, we didn't have that connection when we had our listening sessions. We were still trying to connect with the county with mental health and behavioral health services. But I think that sometimes we also have to start in-house and then work our way out. We do have a behavioral health department. We had an event for mental health, our first annual event, and we wanted our behavioral staff to come out. They didn't have the capacity to be able to provide health education or be out at an event because they're very stretched thin, you know, and that already talks a lot about this service. That we don't have enough providers, we don't have enough staff to maybe do all of the preventive part. Right. And once we get to the findings, I can share a little more on what our findings are. But to answer your question, when we conducted our listening sessions, we still didn't have a connection with the county, and we weren't able to have someone from our own department because of their capacity to be out at our events.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Before we get to the next question, I want to remind folks that if you do have a question for any of the panelists, to please put it in the chat box, and strongly encourage you to think of, you know, any other thing that we haven't talked about or touched upon that you would like to know about their experience and learn from their work. So please put your questions in the chat. And so the next question, I'm getting into, you know, more about what did you learn and what are some of the outcomes. So you talked, each of you kind of talked a bit about what happened during the listening sessions, but can you go a little bit deeper into kind of what did you learn the most about forging these partnerships, or anything else that you learned outside of that and working with the community? I'll let you guys volunteer to go instead of me calling on you. So who would like to?
I can go first since I had already had the microphone unmuted. I think I'm going to share a little bit more on our findings and then share a few more quotes. One of our findings is definitely mental health stigma, our culture, our Latinx culture, fear of the mental health diagnosis, because again, of like saying, oh, estoy loca, loco, am I crazy? That's only for crazy people. We saw that word come up a lot. Assumption that mental health it's only related to drugs, drug use and alcoholism. That did come up a lot. So, that it was only for people that were and would use a lot of drugs and things like this. And also we did have some males that did share that as a male and first generation, you are taught to be strong and show no emotions. There is a social pressure to not share what's going on inside of these individuals that were part of our listening sessions. Another finding that we had was the culture disconnect and language barrier. We did have a lot of our participants share that whenever they would go to their appointment, they didn't feel comfortable sharing what really was happening because maybe the provider would not understand. And if they had someone translating, it felt very uncomfortable having that middle person then translate. And maybe that translation was not how they wanted. So they weren't comfortable saying like, oh, they are fully translating what I'm really sharing correctly. So and that there was like like I mentioned, a lot of them share that there was like there was a big disconnect between the provider and the patient. One of the quotes that I have here is, let me move my screen a little bit. One of my big issue we have is the language barrier, since most mental health workers speak English. Translators don't always interpret correctly and doesn't know our culture. And it's uncomfortable, difficult to share very personal, private details with the translator who has to repeat it to someone else. And that
a
was
translator that they don't know. So it wasn't a family member, it was just a translator. Like
yeah, it was a translator. And also another community member shared that while back when they would have these appointments, they didn't have any translators provided. So they would walk around asking any other staff that would speak the language to be able to have this appointment. So for us, that's it happens a lot, and it's very shocking because sometimes these patients don't even have insurance. So they have to ask for the day off and then also pay out of pocket for their appointment. And when the appointment doesn't go through as how it's supposed to go through, it's very sad to hear this from our community members.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was going to ask if you notice in terms of perceptions or willingness to share and openness, were there any gender differences that you noticed, if at all? Just curious.
Was that my internet?
No, are you able to, can you hear me? I think she's frozen.
Was that me or was it you all?
I'm not sure, but I think you froze on my end. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Technology, it happens. So were you able to catch the question?
No, I didn't.
I was just curious about whether or not you saw any gender differences in terms of willingness to share or perspectives on, mental health. Yeah. So we'd love to hear your experience from that.
We did have some females, more females than males, but the males were harder for us to get. Come on, you're part of this listening session. We want to hear more from you all. And there was one participant that he did mention that I identify as male, that he was just here to learn what other people had to say and relate to what everyone was saying. But it's harder for males to be more open about this topic and especially like I mentioned, when we're the trusted staff, we do have a lot of females that are leaders that were very comfortable sharing their experiences. So there was a big difference when it comes to sharing their personal or what needs are still in the community.
Okay, so Divinity, did you see a similar thing? And I know working with the multicultural community, again, you had male and females in your group as opposed to working with all one gender?
Yeah, I would say the split was about 65% female, 35% male, and all the findings that Yera has shared very similar to what we found. I would say that there was also generational differences, which I mean we talked about that already, but that was something we found. I love that G talked about the youth sessions. We didn't really have any young people in our listening sessions. That's one blind spot that I think we missed. I'd say most of our crowd was over 30, definitely over 25. And so we didn't get that voice of the youth. And I think that was a miss on our part. But I would echo the findings that have already been shared. The only other thing I would add is that it seemed like once the county presenter got going, people seemed to identify with their services, and which they hadn't before. And so maybe there were services that the county offered that were like, free options and things like that that people had taken advantage of. They just never knew that it was the county behind it. So
Gotcha. Okay. And then G, what about your learnings and key findings? I think you're on
So,
mute.
our learnings and findings, we actually had, like I probably mentioned earlier, I think I did. We had 32 youth in our session, and then we'll have 10 elders in the elder session. A majority of the youth that attended were females. They were females. I think there was probably only like 7 or 8 men, and then the elders. It was a good half and half. And as you both have mentioned, it's just not a cultural thing for us. It's a cultural thing for for every race and ethnicity across the board. Our men, they did not talk as much. They did not voice their concerns, or they did not voice their experience. It wasn't until the very end, like the last hour, because we did our listening session for 2 hours. It wasn't until the last hour that the men started, putting down their hats and be like, they're masking the hats and be like, okay, you know what? I want to come out too and share my experience, And majority of the ladies, they were very bold. They shared experience. They shared how they overcome their mental health issues and what kind of help they seek. And they were basically teaching us, the host, and everybody else. So even though our event was 2 hours, they still wanted to go for a few more hours, because they've never had a space where they can elaborate on the concerns and experiences that they face. But when we did our advocacy event, we had a cultural practitioner educate them on our understanding of what mental health is. And then we had I believe she was the assistant director for our Department of Behavioral Health. She did the presentation on Mental Health Service Act for the monk session. So we were able to flip flop and swap presenters, so that we get even understanding of where each community is coming from. And that helped our community a lot, because they were able to see the face of the individual, if not in person, virtually, that's working very hard to implement these services and bridge these connections between our community and the community at large, and the behavioral health department. So what we found that was the most I guess you can say, one of the key outcomes would be just having more interpersonal sessions, events, gatherings, whatever it may be. Having interpersonal events usually bring people together more. People are more present. People are also more engaged, because they for some reason, I don't know about you guys, but in our community, when our host, our presenter, our guest is in front of us, and we can physically see, touch, or feel them, it's just that much more genuine, and we just feel that much more welcome, and we just feel that much more accepted, whether it's their whole community or just that one individual from the county. It helped our elders open up their opened up their thoughts and their stigma about the mental health system. A lot of them thought that us referring them to behavioral health was just trying to get behavioral health a number that they have to meet so that they can get money from the state. Yes, that is one piece, but then again, we also educated them that it was not just that. They do have the services that can help our community members, and they do have specialized counselors, practitioners, and individuals that can prescribe medication, can refer them to other services that can support their mental health needs. So it's just having that interpersonal connection that will really bring people together.
Yeah, I mean, being on Zoom is convenient, and medium when there's no alternative, but there's nothing like, being in person and being able to connect with someone in that way. Yeah, and I've seen the differences between spending, a year and a half doing this, which is great, but also really appreciating when there is an opportunity to be in person and interact with someone that way. Totally different dynamic. So I have one more question, and just want to remind people to put their questions in the chat, but also I wanted to share an experience that I had this past Thursday when I was in Oakland, and we talked about the differences in terms of men versus women sharing. And I went to, it was called Create the Space. And there was this guy named Denzel who created this whole movement and support for Black men. And there were about 4 or 5 Black men, mostly I would say in their 20s and 30s, who actually got up on a public stage and shared their personal stories. And we're very emotional about it in some cases, but we're definitely open and transparent. And it was part of their journey to get to that point, but I could also see how much of a release it was for some of the men who actually got up to share, and how much they were holding on to that, caused them stress in the past, but really appreciated being able to let it all out and have a forum to share what their life experience has been like and how that has affected them from an emotional and mental health standpoint. So it was a beautiful thing to see. And the audience was, all comprised of people that they didn't even know, but also was very supportive and embraced all the men and what they shared. So it was great to see that. So my last question has to do with effective strategies for cultivating these community relationships and partnerships between CBOs, other community partners, and also the county public health organizations or behavioral health organizations. And Divinity, why don't you go with that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it because, like I said, we offered cash stipend incentives for these organizations that we had no prior relationship with. And now they're like a part of our mailing list. They know who we are. We shouldn't lose touch with them. And so we're just in the process now of figuring out what are the right touch points to keep these organizations close, or to let them know if they're having events that they think, could be relevant to us, we would like them to invite us. I think just having them on our mailing list isn't enough though. So we're still thinking through how to engage them. And then when it comes to like the speakers, or for example, the Cambodian dance that the woman did for us, we had a Native American drumming group that did a performance during our listening session. We really made our listening session like a party, a virtual party. And then we had 45 minutes of time for the Q&A and the listening session portion, but we interspersed these other things. So I say all that to say we're still figuring it out, the best way to engage. and how to make our content, our core content, which is focused on Black women and girls, relevant to, you know, this community-based group that whose focus is the Korean American community. You know, how do we stay relevant? And I think mental health is the great connector, right? It's one of those things where it doesn't matter what your ethnic profile is,
Right.
you're dealing with it. And so we're still figuring it out.
Okay, great, thank you. Yara?
Yeah, when it comes to CBOs, as our outreach worker, we have a beautiful connection with a lot of the organizations that are in our community, because we always see each other in the community, and we are always working together. So I don't think there's challenges there. Our challenge is more when it comes to the county. And I get like we mentioned before, the county has a lot of services and a lot of resources, but they're not accessible. So one of the ways that we have been doing is identifying what the needs are for the CBOs, and then finding that point of contact in the county. When we had a hard time finding that point of contact, then the cold calls start to happen. So we just had our meeting with behavioral health and mental health services from the county, maybe I think last week or 2 weeks ago, but it was very recent. And I think our timing was really good because we had done our listening sessions. So when we had our meeting with the county, we shared all of the findings. And then that's when they want to work with us, because they see the numbers and they see everything that we're doing. But just making that connection with the right person, I think that sometimes is the hard part. So what we started doing also is, when we would see them out in the community, even if they were not working with behavioral health services, mental health, if they were working on another department, we would get their email and, hey, I just want to follow up. Who would be the right person? And they do take a while sometimes to get back to us, but at the same time, we do understand that they don't have all of the answers. But just being there and very always knocking the door and trying to go to all of the town halls that they might have, and just being present where the county is present, so they can identify that, oh, there's someone here from Vista Community Clinic. But sometimes it's very hard to, and yeah, when you talk to them, when you see them out on the community, like, oh yeah, we have all of these services. And it's always like, well, why don't we know about these services? Like, we are CBOs, we should know about these services, because our community doesn't know how to navigate your resources or how to get there.
So being persistent is
yes. Yeah.
All right, and then G, then what effective strategies were you able to identify that worked for you all?
So we have a really good connection with our behavioral health department, our public health department. You know, our director, he is on a lot of board of directors, and you know, he's also on a lot of commissioners. You know, I think he's like sub, and then he's also like primary for some of them too. So it's really good that you guys, or that we established the relationship with, you know, our local partners when we are in need of, you know, data, statistics, you know, or support, or letter of support. You know, all we have to do is just reach out, and they would, you know, they would help us out. And a lot of time it's because, you know, the prize definitely goes to our staff. You know, our staff, they're the ones that are always out there outreaching, you know, during the local events, resource fairs, tabling at the local Hmong stores, and providing resources and services and referrals. a lot of times, we would also encourage our staff and programs to be a part of cultural competency committee meetings, or being a part of the equity teams that they have here in Butte County. Whatever organization or committee that pertains to our goals and objectives here at the Hmong Culture Center, we have our teams be a part of. And when we need the support, being a part of these committees, a word of mouth can go quite a ways. So that's what we've been seeing, that it has been most effective, whether it comes down to trying to find recruitment for the listening sessions, or finding a presenter for the advocacy events, or just having somebody to come in and train our team member or our community member, or having somebody from the community go and train or talk on behalf of the community as a whole to our stakeholders and providers, providing trainings. It's all reciprocal, it's a give and take kind of thing. And our community has a long way to go, but then again, we're slowly
made some progress.
We're slowly making some progress, little baby steps at a time.
Yep. So I think we're right on time. It's 3:05 and we have a dance party to get to, I think is the next thing on the agenda. So we get a chance to work it out, relieve some stress, stand up, stretch, because sitting all day long is not good for us and not healthy. But I want to thank all of you for your patience and for sharing all that you did today. I didn't see any questions in the chat. There's just a comment. So I think we're good to go to the next phase. And so I think my takeaway from what I heard all of you say is that, building these community-based partnerships and relationships takes time. It's a process, and being persistent and kind of, we always talk about meeting the community people where they are, but meeting some of the agencies or organizations that we have to work with where they are too, in terms of their process of being connected to the community and where they may go out into the community. So thank you again. Nice to meet and see you all. And I'll see you in the main room. All right. Thanks a lot. Okay.